taken what I've learned from a campaign for universal health care, through a campaign for paid sick days, and now I'm working on it in environmental issues, especially against fossil fuel infrastructure and kind of for just transition type stuff. So that's my background. I'm interested in hearing your name and why you're here. You try it on for this session, right? So like, even if you may disagree with some of the premises I'm operating off of, try it on for a little bit, and if you still have some gripes with it, we can chat about it maybe towards the end. But just for the purposes of keeping us moving, I come from a background that's heavily influenced by labor organizing, and so as a result, that may be a little bit of a different frame than what you're used to. So let's try it on, use our imaginations, give it our sort of most gracious selves as we go on. So we're gonna start off by talking about what is organizing, and then we're gonna get down into an organizing conversations, what they look like. We're gonna talk about issues, more about organizing conversations, and then a conclusion with an open time for questions and for ongoing roles. Both of these are going to involve a significant role-playing component, which is everybody's favorite thing. So it's gonna be super fun. There are 20 of you, which is great because I have 20 roles. So if we had any more, we'd be in trouble. So let's start with a conversation of what is organizing. And I actually want to start out by taking a look at the situation that we're in. One more person came. Okay. I cursed myself. I did. So we are obviously, I think that for the purposes of this workshop, you can quibble with me about this outside of the workshop, but we're in a situation right now where at least in the fields that I organize in, we are losing, right? Like climate change is happening, emissions still going out into the atmosphere, they are still building the pipelines all around the Northeast, and also we're losing on things like economics, right? Like neoliberalism continues, accumulation of various resources continues, dispossession continues, poverty is increasing in this country. These are issues that I care about. And what's abundantly obvious to me is that the status quo is one where the people who it benefits have more power than we do. So let's start by thinking about organizing in terms of power and in terms of, I want you guys to just popcorn out some of the things that the people in power have that keep them in power. What resources do they have? Go on.
Money donating to campaigns.
Money.
Access.
To politicians. Yep. Media.
Free time.
Sorry, what was that?
Free time.
Free time. Oh yeah.
Armies.
Mm-hmm.
Training.
What?
Training.
Training. Yeah. And maybe information too. I feel like they always have a lot more information than we do about anything. Inertia, yeah. Marketing.
Privileged treatment by police and judicial systems.
Sorry, say that again?
Privileged treatment by police and judicial systems.
Mm-hmm. So can we actually say that the police and judicial systems are sort of aspects of their functioning? Can we just put that whole system up here?
Sure.
Thanks.
History.
One of the things that would work against them, but
Well,
Maybe it's kind of ties into the inertia, right?
Right.
So let's move over. I've drawn like a really rough, we'll get to this in a second. So what do we have that is maybe more abundant than what they have? Sorry? Compassion. What? The truth. Okay, but these things aren't gonna, they're not gonna move things on their own, right? What do we have maybe that is a more abundant resource than what they have? Numbers. People.
Well, if you get people in your camp.
Exactly. And that is what we're talking about. When we talk about organizing,
Truth power.
we are talking about maybe bringing the truth and compassion, and we are talking about people. So this is a teeter-totter of power, right? This is the fulcrum of power. Right now, they have all of these things that incline it towards them. It is in their favor. The status quo is not going to change until we shift the balance of power towards ours. I happen to believe that because people are the basis of all of these things, really, right? Like, people determine what the value of money is. People participate in these police and judicial systems. All of these things are just ways of covering up and distributing people power in a way that keeps a small minority of people in charge over the much larger majority. So organizing is about bringing people together so that we outnumber them and we can shift the balance of power. That is what organizing is. And what that means is both bringing more people into the movement, and it also means building up our own skills as people and our own leadership ability, which is something that everybody has. And I'll get into that kind of towards the end of this session. So when we talk about organizing, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about people. We're talking about the old slogan that the only thing that can defeat organized money is organized people. They have all the money, but we have almost all of the people when you really break it down. So to do that, you need to have conversations with people. And so this workshop is mostly going to focus on how we have the kinds of conversations that really bring people into our movement, that create this kind of organization among people in order to start shifting this balance of power. So we're going to start off by talking a little bit about the anatomy of an organizing conversation. And this is the basic, we call it the building block of organizing, right? Like there's a lot of other stuff. There's movement strategy, there's how you shape your movement organization. But essentially the idea here is that the building block of any kind of organizing campaign are conversations that happen between one person and another person. Usually one person who may be part of the movement organization and somebody who is not yet part of the movement organization. I want to take a brief detour before we get into this and talk a little bit about canvassing, which is something that Patrick mentioned to me at our Resist Spectra Action Camp last month, which is that how many of you guys have canvassed before? Maybe gone door to door, knocked on doors, chatted with some people, passed out flyers, stuff like that? Yeah, most of us have canvassed before. It is often an action that uses different skills than having an organizing conversation, and it may actually bend your understanding of that canvassing action to really start having these deeper organizing conversations. The reason for that is simple. When you're canvassing, you're trying to reach as many people as possible and to give them information. When you're organizing, you are thinking of a particular group of people generally that you're trying to organize, and you are going to go deeper with each person to really get into what they care about. So that brings us to the first part of an organizing conversation. We're going to do these kind of 2 steps at a time, which break it down neatly. I don't want you to get into steps 3 through 6 yet, so I haven't written them up. But this is a kind of 6-step model that I learned from both some of my labor organizer friends, mostly in public sector worker organizing, things like emergency dispatchers, nurses at public hospitals, teachers, etc. And it's also been used in a modified format by many of the social movement organizations that I've come into encounters with. So, to start off, the first step is to introduce yourself. And this is important. It kind of gets neglected, but people in general we live in a world where people are alienated from each other, and if people sense that you're manipulating them, they do not want to listen to you. So it is to your benefit to be upfront about your organizational affiliation when you first introduce yourself. You're going to be spending a lot of time listening. I'll get into that in just a second. But you want to start out by saying something like, and for this example, as we go through this, we're going to be using Spectra's AIM pipeline in Westchester County, but I am aiming to give you this breakdown in a way that will benefit whatever you're organizing on. So I'm hoping that it will expand across a variety of issues, and some of this has been structured to do that. But for example, you would introduce yourself by saying something like, "Hi, I'm Shay. I am with Resist Spectra. We are working on this gas pipeline. What do you think about that?" This is not where you want to go into the full scope of your organization's tactics or plans.
Threw me curveballs that I wasn't prepared to answer, right? About what your concerns were, and they were not matching mine.
Oh,
Okay, how do you think about that?
interesting.
Right?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, Matt.
I have a partner who's largely just not terribly interested in the first place. I was like, how do I find a place in you that might care about this? But I don't know how to ask that question without leading questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good instinct, right? Is how do we tie the issues that people care about into the issue that we're organizing on? And in some classic community organizing, you would actually not have an issue that you're going in with, right? Like, Saul Alinsky, when he went into Chicago neighborhoods, he would go in and he would ask people and have these one-on-ones and pull out issues that matter to them. But often we don't have the luxury of doing that, right? So like many of us are organizing against this fracked gas pipeline, and like, we don't like, it's supposed to have gas flowing through it by November 1st, right? Like we are organizing with the specific goal of stopping this pipeline, and we're working for an organization, or we're volunteering with an organization that is directed towards stopping this pipeline. So what you really have to do is figure out how to tie the issues that people care about to this particular issue. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk a little about issues. What were some issues that weren't the pipeline that came up in your conversations?
Company that's building the pipeline. That is really difficult. Like how do you talk to someone like that? It's, because of course that's their livelihood and it is kind of number one priority to them at the moment.
What issues did you hear from your partner? Like what did she care about or was worried about or felt like?
Paying her mortgage.
And her mortgage, okay. So some economic security issues?
Unemployment.
Unemployment? Yeah. Sarah.
Kids often move jobs in college. They're going to have a future.
Yeah. There are a lot of, like, all of us have multiple issues that we care about. Many of us are only activated on a couple of them, but we all have these various issues that intersect in our lives and that come together. When you're organizing a campaign, if you can choose which issues to organize around, there has historically been a way of identifying which of these issues is a good campaign to organize around. So I'm going to give you 5 criteria, and these are the criteria that I've used to using. First of all, is it broadly felt? Is it felt by a large number of people in the community? Secondly, is it deeply felt? Do people really, like, the people who care about it, do they really care about it? Will they actually do stuff for it? Or is it something that, like, people might care a little bit about it, but they don't feel passionate about it? Is it easily understood? The Spectra's AIM pipeline actually has a real boon for us because you just say, it's a fracked gas pipeline 105 feet from a nuclear power plant. People get that right away, one sentence. Versus trying to organize a campaign in Peekskill around the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is our target in many cases in the fight, but is not easily understood by the people you're going to talk to on the street. Is there a target? Speaking of targets, is there a target? Is there someone or even some entity that can take action and change this issue, right? Like, so instead of an issue being something very, I personally care a lot about ending capitalism. I think it's a system that is going to devour everything if we don't stop it, and it's a system that has countless gallons of blood on its hands. But if I go up to people and start organizing and have an organizing conversation with them, and I'm like, what do you think about capitalism? You want to end it? It doesn't have a target. People may feel really passionate about ending capitalism, but who do you target for that? It's not an issue that can be winnable in the short term. There's no target to go after. And that gets us to the 5th one. People, at least initially, as you're building power, people want an issue that is solvable, that you can make progress on. This doesn't have to be your ultimate goal, and I would encourage you to avoid thinking of it as your ultimate goal, right? But when you're coming together around an issue, especially in the first stages of building up people power, you want it to be something that has a possible solution. And continue to be part of strategic conversations is whether to refight the fight for universal health care, which they got a mandate for it from the State House, and then when it came time to fund it, the governor basically said, all my rich friends don't want to pay more taxes, so I have to raise taxes on the rest of you all to an unsustainable level, and so we can't fund it. The money isn't there. Meanwhile, he has his multi-million-dollar lake house, right? This is how it goes. So we've been thinking about whether to refight this campaign, and thinking about what issues matter to people in a way that can bring them in to focus on universal health care. And something that I've been talking with people about is actually the heroin epidemic in Vermont, which is an issue that is broadly felt. It's affecting a lot of the towns up there. It's deeply felt. If people know an addict, it's really, 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 they are very passionate about making sure people can achieve care for that and treatment. It's easily understood. Again, everybody knows somebody who's affected by heroin abuse. There is a target, right? There are people in the state government who can appropriate more money to social services. And it's, to a certain extent, it's solvable, right? If the problem is that we need, people can't drive 50 miles to go to the one like clinic in their like state quadrant. There's a solution to that. You can open more clinics. You can give people like better facilities. You can get people the care that they need, and you can even propose a universal healthcare system as part of that. So that's again an issue that people are listening for. That might well be the foundation of the campaign. So when you're listening for issues, a lot of these different issues are going to come up. And if you're organizing around a particular issue, one of your jobs as an organizer is to figure out how their issue ties into your issue. It may not always. There are definitely times where you say, thank you for your time, like, I really appreciate it, like, Godspeed, be on your way. But if there is an issue that ties into it, like say Hurricane Sandy and Sandy recovery, your job as an organizer in this conversation is to ask, not necessarily manipulative or leading questions, but to kind of give bits of information and ask questions that help people tie these threads together. And part of that is about, I mean, I sometimes talk about it as getting down to some of the deeper values that motivate people, that drive people, which can often break through some opposition to connect their issue to your issue, and to kind of illuminate as you agitate that these are interconnected and that they have a personal interest in joining your campaign. Yeah.
So it's like an unstructured dialectic. You know where you want it to go, supporting your position. You just let them determine how you get there.
Yeah.
Let them pick which streets.
And you're not always going to get them there, right? Like, we talk sometimes about the spectrum of allies. How many of you guys have poked at that tool before? Spectrum. Okay. So the spectrum of allies is basically a spectrum that goes from the dedicated opposition to the dedicated and active supporters. And in the middle you have passive opposers, you have people who are neutral, and you have passive supporters. So passive people are people who agree or disagree, but they're not doing anything about it. And your job when you have organizing conversations is partly to move people along that spectrum of allies. That's also what you want to do in some of your actions, true, too, but your goal is to move people from, sometimes you're gonna have a conversation with somebody that, there are two of you out there who have a role of somebody who's like hardcore opposed to any organizing against the pipeline. Two of you have that role, I know that. And whoever is organizing that person, somebody who's really a dedicated opposer, may not be able to move into being a dedicated supporter. Like that's probably not gonna happen. But what you can do is you can have enough conversations with them and you can listen to them, and you can listen to their issues, and you can talk to them in a respectful way that they might not go out and counter-protest you at your next demonstration.
Because I don't do this kind of thing, often talk to people on the street. How long is it? Should you expect a conversation to go on? So, I mean, generally, did most people, if they had enough of you, 3 minutes, is that right? Or, because I was trying to figure out how far and how quickly I should try and delve into the conversation. And it's like, I guess one of the things you have to do is anticipate that.
Jane and I just did that today. What happened today, Jane?
I think you just kind of read the person, Sometimes it just rolls out, it's comfortable, you can tell by their posture, they're not in a rush. They're smiling or they're engaged, and other times they're just like, I wish this woman would shut up. I think you have to read all those signs.
Listen to the listener.
Yeah.
Jess?
Yeah, I think it always, every part of the conversation, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure book, right? And you're like seeing what registers with people, different things make different people pay attention. You never know what it's going to be, and so if the first thing doesn't kind of catch, then you might move to another talking point, and you kind of go with the flow and figure out what the relationship is. And the canvassing I've done, like I've been invited into people's living rooms before, and I've been told to get the fuck out of my face before, so like it goes everywhere in between, basically, and you can have any kind of those conversations, and it could be an hour, or it could be 20 seconds, and you just have to, know when you're having a conversation that's, relating, and when there's one that they're just like, you can see when someone's got that wall up and it's just not worth your energy. Like, okay, thank you very much.
And people respect that too, right? So like when we talk about organizing versus canvassing, it's often that when you're organizing, there's a specific constituency of people you're trying to organize. So the most obvious example is like when you're organizing a labor union, you want to organize for workers in your shop into a local of the union. And so like you want to be having conversations as deep as possible with all of the workers in the shop. But people respect it if you can recognize when they're throwing you body language that says, I don't want to talk to you anymore, and you walk away. Like, they respect people who give them space too. So it's really all about having a human conversation with people. When I was up in Vermont, when I was really cutting my teeth organizing, I was mostly reaching out to clergy, which is not my normal way of organizing around religion, but in this time I had a summer, and it seemed like the best way to make sure that any progress I made would be incorporated into future work. And something I discovered is that, especially people in the helping professions aren't used to being listened to. And I think that's true of most people too. People are often, most people in our society are very lonely. And most people in our society are really desperate for somebody to listen to them. And I just remember this conversation I had with a pastor who I went into her office and thought we were gonna have a conversation about paid sick days, because I wanted her to sign onto my petition for paid sick days and to circulate it in the pews of her little rural church. And we ended up having a conversation about where she just told me all about how in the last week, and this was within 2 minutes of me introducing myself, and in the last week she'd done 5 funerals because she was the only one in her 3-town area who would do funerals of people who didn't belong to her church. And so she was having to bury old people who had had overdoses, basically everybody in this 3-town area that was not a member of a local fundamentalist church. And that changed the conversation a lot, right? I'm not gonna push on her okay, great, but sign this petition for paid sick days and maybe more people won't die, right? That's goofy. But listen, we have a respectful conversation and discovered that she just really wanted to share what her life was like and to have somebody listen. I mean, maybe New Yorkers out in the street not so much, but that's just been my experience. One of the real goals of organizing, and that's even if they have an issue that doesn't correlate with yours, is to move people from a sense of individual isolation to collective power. Your goal is to give them the sense that their personal issue is actually a collective issue and is actually a collective problem that will require a collective solution. So coming together with other people. And I think this gets to at the human side of it, right? We want to help people see that they're not alone. That they've got us, that they've got each other, that they've got other people who have the same issue who can come together and exert their power and kind of bring it to bear on the systems that are oppressing us. And so, a lot of cases, this is where you might be able to start talking about some of the technical stuff at hand. You might start talking a little bit about just asking people questions do you know anybody else who has that problem? Who do you think is responsible for that? What do you think is, why do you think that's happening? Who makes the decisions about how that works? Who makes the decisions about whether you get health care or not? Do anybody else in your family have issues attaining health care? So moving them from the sense that it's an individual problem to a sense of a collective problem to a sense of collective power. Number 4 here is inoculation. This is actually really important. This is something that's been really strong in the labor movement for a long time. In this sense, you want to tell them what the opposition is going to say, what they're going to hear from the opposition. Because if you don't, people are smart as hell, right? People are much smarter than I think our entire culture gives them credit for. They know what's good for them in general. They know what matters to them, and they know they have a very strong sense that the world is not what it should be. And if they get fired up about, universal health care, for example, we really can have a healthcare system that benefits everybody, that isn't for private gain. And then they go home and, they're talking to their partner over dinner, or they're talking to their aunt who is a health insurance company worker, and immediately the person says, oh, but that's going to raise taxes on everybody, and this is the first they've ever heard of raising taxes. It's going to deflate the air of their balloon. So you want to kind of inoculate them, sort of you're inoculating them against a disease, by acknowledging that you've also heard the opposition, right? We all know what the opposition says about us. We know that, we've heard that natural gas is a cleaner fuel, and it's not true. So you want to tell them, if you talk to people about this, they're going to tell you this. That's not true. Here's why. Or I think that, and that might not just be a factual thing, it might be a values thing too. It might be a, you know, you've heard that you'll hear from people that it's impossible, that we can't make it happen, but like, I mean, I really believe that people are stronger than that. Not everybody feels that this is an important part of the ask, but some of my Libra friends really insist that it's important to call the question, which is to say basically, to ask very clearly, like, which side are you on? Get people to make that commitment, and then give them a kind of specific assignment, and ask that's based out of what you've heard from them before about what their life is like, about what their capacity is, all this other stuff. Like, frankly, at this point in the conversation, you should know at least something about their family in general. People, like, family life is a huge part. It's very important to people. If you've been listening to them, people will usually go talk to their family, something like that. So if you've heard that I know that there's some busy single parents out there. If you've heard that they're really busy or something like that, or you've heard that their neighbor is also concerned about this pipeline, you're going to make ask a specific assignment that's based in that knowledge that you've gathered, and that focuses on like something that you think they would actually do. And if they say no, if they balk at it, if they want to do something different, of course that's fine. But you want to make sure that it's specific. Not just will you join up with us, but like, will you, you know, you told me before that you're like everybody else, like there are 3 other people in your neighborhood who also have asthma, and you think it might be pipeline related. You're just thinking about this right now. Can you talk to them? And you're gonna have a specific time to follow up with them as well, right? And this is important because like, I feel like a lot of times, I know that I'm not as responsible in my personal relationships, not just my organizing relationships, as I ought to be sometimes. And like, people are flaky as hell these days. I know I'm flaky as hell sometimes. And so like, being clear with people and following through with it and saying, you know, great, like you seem really excited about talking to your sister about this. Can I call you back at this time a week from today and hear from you about how it went? So that people know that you're gonna follow up with them, so that people know that like you're gonna stay in relationship with them, that they know that you're also there to support them. About the ongoing role of the organizer. And this is just that like, this is a one-on-one conversation. We role-played like the first conversation you have with somebody, but these conversations continue to happen because ideally you're establishing the foundation of a relationship with people. And the goal of an organizer overall, kind of as you continue organizing, is to move people into these concentric circles of leadership. So just to give you some definitions here, in general, like most community organizations have a constituency that they have in mind, like the people who, like say that you are organizing against the school to prison pipeline, your constituency would be like students of color in the public school system. Your base would be, or in some cases, just like poor students of all colors in the public school system. Your base would be people who maybe come to events sometimes, but aren't official members if there are members of your organization. Members would be people who are official members, and leaders are people who are, maybe they don't have a form, maybe there's no formal hierarchy or anything else, but they are people who have developed an analysis and an understanding and skills, whether facilitation, whether action planning, whether organizing skills, in order to kind of step up and play a leadership role in these organizations. So your goal is always to deepen, as much as possible, like in relationships with people, to deepen their engagement and to lift them up and their sense up as people who can be agents of change, who know what's best for them, and who are capable of making democratic decisions with other people in their community to shape a better world. Any questions?
Yeah.
Cool.